of well-being omitted? Thanks.
Meka Whaitiri.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chairman. Thank you for this opportunity, and clearly what we're trying to do here is modernise our intelligence and security bill, which needs to be commended. Mr Chair, just on part two, just prior to our dinner break, colleague Chris Whawhoi raised an issue, and I can't pretend that it's the same issue that I'm about to talk to, but it's in relation to clause number 20 of part 2, specific duties of the Director General of an Intelligence and Security Agency, where we lay out that their duties are taking reasonable steps to ensure that the activities of the agencies are limited to those that are relevant to the performance of its functions. 2, to keep free from any influence or consideration that is relevant to the performance of its function. And 3, which really comes to perhaps my question and clarity from the Minister, political neutral. For example, the activities are not carried out for the purpose of promoting or harming the interests of any political party or candidate. Now, I guess the question that I'd like to ask is whether that's limited to New Zealand political parties, New Zealand candidates, or is it much broader? You know, because clearly we could meet that particular threshold, but it may have wider inferences. And when I look at that clause, Mr Chair, and if I can ask, if we turn to clause 13, in terms of being political neutral, which I think is a very, very high standard, and it should be supported. But when I read clause 13, part 2, where we talk about intelligence collection and analysis, we talk about the function of the intelligence and security agents to collect and analyse intelligence in accordance with the government's priorities. So I guess my question, and I'd welcome the Minister's explanation of how we ensure that by setting government's priorities, and it says in 3.1b, once that intelligence is gathered and analysed, then it is provided to the Minister, the Chief Executive of the Department and other persons, that we can assure that we uphold clause 20 part 3 in terms of maintaining our political neutrality and just making sure that we've got that balance and those checks and balances to ensure there's no over-interference from government priorities as per clause 13, 1A, and the clause that I'm seeking some clarification on, which is clause 20. That's really just a short contribution that I'm keen to hear from the Minister in relation to clarifying that. Thank you.
Mr Chair. Kelvin Davis.